This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
The McDonald's snack wrap is back. You brought it back. Ranch snack wrap. Spicy snack wrap. You broke the internet for a snack. Snack wrap is back. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Welcome to Supernatural Circumstances, the podcast where we take you down the rabbit hole into the fantastic world of the strange, the paranormal, and the unknown. I'm Morgan Knudsen. Come along with me on this week's adventure. Wow, guys, we are delving into the world of EVP, or electronic voice phenomenon, today. And although that might be a rather tired phrase, a little bit in the world of the paranormal and all of these interesting excursions that people are having, we are not talking about sitting in the dark with a recorder today. Oh no. We are talking about the up-and-coming technology of spirit communication and where people are taking it to the levels in which they are taking it, which are absolutely phenomenal. We're not talking about sitting in the dark with your little recorder and, asking silly questions. No. We're talking about just raising the bar and seeing where science is taking this incredible adventure. So today, I couldn't think of anybody better to have on about this subject than Mr. Ron Yacovetti and Lourdes Gonzalez. These two have a system called the Staticom Project, and it's very interesting. Now, this conversation is going to get a little bit on the techie side today, so bear with us. And we're going to wrap this all up at the end with a little bit more conversation. And we're also going to talk at the end about the level to which even scientists that have come out of NASA are taking this new technology that's been coming out since, the 70s. Really, really interesting conversation. If you guys are ready, let's go.
With a major selection of the looks your kiddos love, starting at just $4 in the Walmart app, a new school year means a stylish new them. Who knew? Find skater skirts and Crocs that say, I'm casual but cool. Sparkly sneakers that say, it's my classroom, you're just learning in it. And preppy polos that say, I'm the teacher's pet, even if they're mommy's menace at home. Find their favorite styles starting at just $4 in the app. The Walmart you thought you knew is now new.
This episode is brought to you by Greenlight. Get this. Adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/Spotify. Greenlight.com/Spotify.
How do you top your love for your cat? With a cascade of decadent savory gravy over a mouth-watering mousse pâté. Fancy Feast gems. 2 gourmet pâtés in one convenient pack. Simply peel and plate to reveal a pyramid shape that makes eating delightful and pamper her with an experience as extraordinary as she is. Turn the everyday into the extraordinary with Fancy Feast gems.
Well, welcome to both of you. It is so great to have you on the show. This has been, I think, a long time coming, and a subject matter that we've not touched on, supernatural circumstances, which is really cool. So both of you guys, Ron, Lourdes, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having us.
Yeah, we really appreciate this. I know I've been telling you up until today that it was kind of a big deal for me, but I remember when we were part of a show called Entity Voices, we ran over 4 years doing the podcast, that we had you on as one of the guests. And for the 4-year span, you were one of the people who really stood out to me because you had an academic rigor. You had just your approach. It was just so much more intellectual, academic, the way you approach things, and whether people agree with you or not, fully, partly, at all. I just thought that the approach was admirable, and I went, that's something I think that the field is missing a lot. So for me, that was an inspiration for me to see that approach, the way you took, the way you do your work, the way you do your research, the way you present what you do.
It's refreshing when you see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that is incredibly kind of you guys to say that, and it's definitely something that I strive for, and I thoroughly enjoyed the interview that you guys are talking about. It was great, and your questions were great. Sometimes you do these interviews and you get repeat questions over and
Yeah.
over, and then the conversation doesn't really go past a certain point, and that's what you guys brought to the table for me was that next level of conversation, and that's what I really want to have today. Is that you guys both study a very niche field of parapsychology, which is video ITC. And that's really interesting to me because I've been knee deep in various methods of spirit communication for quite a while on levels people know about and the levels that people don't know about, studies and stuff that I've been doing kind of behind closed doors. And so this is a really, really interesting subject. Can you guys tell people a little bit about it, as concise as you can make it, and how you guys got into this? Because this isn't something that everybody's really into.
No, that's cool. It's interesting to me too, because I never saw it as a subcategory or even couched within parapsychology, but I could see the practical application of parapsychology in studying this type of phenomenon because of a lot of the factors that are involved in it. What's been kind of niche or new for us, and we can get into it at some point too, was taking the metaphysical, philosophical angle on this stuff, because I think that's something that would be not just beneficial to us or people who do spirit communication, but I think to the field, because I think there's a lot of things that are stagnant for largely metaphysical reasons. We both took up this mantle for different reasons. For me, I was always interested when obviously EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, was something that catches a lot of people in the field in the beginning. It's like, whoa, right? When you hear the first one. Well, when I encountered ITC, or instrumental transcommunication, when it was real time, I was blown away. I was like, that you can do that? You can get a recording and you don't have to hear it later. You can hear it when it happens and then hear it again later.
Right.
So that was staggering to me. And then, for the last 25 or so years, the modality of choice that is really kind of branded in ITC has been the sweeping ghost box modality, the spirit box, the Frank's box, the ghost box. When we came across Dr. Annabella Cardoso and Marcello Bacci's work in direct radio voice, which predates any Frank's box or spirit box, I looked at Lourdes and I was like, how is nobody doing this? The efficacy of the method, to me, was leaps and bounds ahead of anything I've ever heard a sweeping box do, yet this was largely ignored, at least in the States. So we took up that mantle to try to see if we could do something with it. In 2019, we resurrected direct radio voice. We did a lot of experimentations with heterodyning frequencies, tone generators, anything we think that could maybe add to either resonance or bring voices out, clarity. At one point, a gentleman in Florida named Keith Clark introduced us to software to do real-time filtration, which you cannot do with a sweeping ghost box because of the anomaly you're looking for is vocal. If you're putting vocals into the process through sweeping, it's like dropping coins at the beach and coming back 2 hours later with a metal detector going, look what I found.
Right. Yeah.
You put it there. So we brought it back, and then through that development, it became now what we call the digital seance, which is using pure white noise, which we do everything people do with review in the moment of contact. We denoise it, we amplify it a little bit, and we were the first in ITC to do this that I know of, slowing down the flow of live white noise. There's no sweep, there's no data, there's no RF reception. It's a closed circuit system using analog white noise generators, and slowing it down because the voices came in incredibly fast. And we had one instance when I believe it was my mother and grandmother coming through that sobered me to that and reminded me, and this is what the takeaway is, the having reverence and respect for those who came before us, those whose shoulders we stand on. Because that was something Konstantin Radove had said, that these vocals not only come in faster than we could detect, but they come in faster than the human vocal tract is capable of speaking. And when I had that recording, it was like, wait a minute, remember that thing he said? So that's that's kind of for me where it came into. And Lourdes, both vocationally brings a unique skill to this, and she also had a very early fascination with EVP.
Well, um, yeah. So my family, when I was little, practiced espiritismo, which is a form of mediumship in the Caribbean. So I grew up with it. So the paranormal for me was normal, like it was just a normal thing.
The way it
But
should be.
yeah, it
Yeah.
is actually. It
Yeah.
is a normal experience. People don't realize
Yeah,
that.
she's our people.
Yeah, because you're right. But so they were physical, or they are, or they were, because some of them don't practice anymore. But they were physical mediums, and my mom was the only one, or one of the few that didn't practice. And I saw something that traumatized me. My cousin was channeling, and she bumped into my mom, and then my mom was channeling. And I knew my mom didn't practice, and it was, she didn't move that way, she didn't sound that way. So it traumatized me, and so I shied away from the paranormal. I knew it was real, but I respected it, right? And then I still had some experiences through dreams and things like that. So anyway, fast forward, I meet this gentleman right here.
The guilty party.
And it's true. What hooked me was that first EVP that I heard. Just knowing that it was just me and him in the room, and I know neither one of us spoke, and we're not gonna fool each other. And there was something saying yes. So that hooked me like that. And then when he came up to me talking about white noise and everything, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And then we started hearing voices. It was the closest thing to an EVP for me, like the purest thing to an EVP, the closest thing.
Right.
So yeah, so it hooked me immediately.
That's
What's
the
interesting
hallmark
is
of
that.
a.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
That's the hallmark of a good relationship is when you tell your other half that not only are we going to listen to white noise static, we're going to record it and listen to it again, and she's still here.
You make a good point, because that can get damn tedious. We all know it can get damn tedious.
Yes, it can.
I think it's really cool because, the one thing I was talking to the audience about earlier was the influence in the ITC world of people like Klaus Schreiber, people who really worked with like visual communications and things like that, using video. I think it's really interesting. You're getting audio as well. I don't think initially people were getting audio through this. They weren't combining the two things. It was like it was either video or and you were getting these images on your television, and you're creating this sort of information loop that's filming the white noise static and then getting this information loop coming back. But it's interesting to me that this is kind of translated over to audio. So for all the techie people out there, your answer was great. For all the people who have no idea what the hell we're talking about, can you explain a bit, Ron, about what you were saying, and break it down for people as to what the significance is of this new system that you've developed? Because the one thing that I think people immediately when they hear things like the sweeping radio and things like that, instantly the skeptical guard goes up. I know mine does specifically. I've been a humongous critic of anything to do with ghost boxes, Frank's box, anything like that. I've been a massive critic of that. But can you break down for the audience who I know might be thinking the same thing? What is it about what you're doing that makes it potentially authentic?
No, I appreciate that. It is fundamentally different. The only thing I think that there's a commonality between the ghost box and what we do is I think that the ghost box modality, when designed, doesn't work the way that they thought it does. We think that on a fundamental level, it works the same as what we do, but the method itself inhibits what it's able to do. It is
Interesting.
less vetted because it does have the ability to receive signal. So key differences, we don't have radio reception. We can't receive an RF signal. So we were using a long wave vacant no radio emission channel in the beginning with like direct radio voice, but we were in a zinc mine below the surface of the earth in New Jersey, which is pretty much a geological Faraday cage. And with that, we got voices that still responded.
Wow.
Spirit box users were striking out. And so that told us that there's something to this. So what
Right.
we think happens, we think that it's through stochastic or inverse stochastic resonance, that if something matches any of the frequencies in the white noise, something introduced into it, let's say, which is the voice or the mentation of spirit or consciousness, that if it resonates with one of those, then through resonance you get amplitude, right? And then from that amplitude you have something that's now resonating over the noise floor. And what our system does is when it filters and cleans it up in real time, at the end all you hear is anything that's emergent over the noise floor, because we're filtering out. So you don't hear the static. It's not as distracting to listen to.
Yeah.
It's not sweeping, and there's no data in white noise. This is analog white noise that's created in real time, unlike a sleep machine. We think that the ghost boxes work the same way fundamentally, that it's resonance, because, well, for two reasons. One, Lourdes had noticed that when you listen to those, if you do hear responses, which we grade on timing and relevance,
Makes
right?
sense.
If
Yeah.
I say, what color is my shirt, and a voice says blue, yes, you could say, oh, maybe it's a DJ, but if it's a radio DJ, he must be clairvoyant, because he nailed it at the exact moment I asked the question. So timing and relevance is a grading tool for us for that. But there's a brevity to the messages on ghost boxes that direct radio voice even didn't have, from not sweeping. So we think if resonance is how it works, then every time a ghost box hits a frequency, even through quick millisecond sweeps, it would be like if we were on the phone and I kept intermittently hitting the mute button, because now they're not availed to that resonance, because there is something else that is interrupting the interference pattern that was coming through on. Plus, from a physics perspective, which I don't know if anybody thought out, the ghost box modality completely seems incoherent and internally inconsistent. Allophones, phonemes, fragments of vocals that make up the lexicon of speech, that make up the words that we know. If you ask a question and for the answer to come through, which not only do they sometimes do before you finish, which is superluminal, faster than speed of light, but those certain sounds have to be in certain places to make certain words at a certain time when you ask a certain question. So from a physics perspective, it completely falls apart. That we're supposed to say what? That spiritual entities are reaching their ethereal fingers into some device and then manipulating these sound fragments like somebody on cocaine playing Scrabble?
Which I
When
think
it's
is,
like
is
with-
kind of the headspace that a lot of people are in about this, by the way.
Because ghosts can do anything.
Right.
They can just do it. But with the ghost boxes, like Ron said, when I heard the voices, it was always never within the sweep. Not to say that sometimes you can hear it in the sweep, I guess, with timing and relevance. But when I heard the voices, it was either below the sweep or it replaced it. So that's why we think they're using the white noise within the sweep, and that's why it's short. That's what you get. They may be able to get longer messages, but because they're sweeping, there's a brevity to the messages, like Ron says.
Yeah, the method inhibits itself through the sweep. So I think it's just a resonance with the white noise. We get sometimes very clear vocals without radio reception, without data, without sweeping, and some of them are supremely clear. Are they always clear? No. But to the cynical standpoint of the consistency of it, I think it's fairly consistent. And if we really want to nitpick it, I pay Verizon really good every month, and they can't always do it. So let's cut other realms or dimensions or whatever it is a break, right? If anything's coming through at all. Again, timed relevant, sometimes commentary on stuff that's in the environment that's quite accurate. So I think even the ghost boxes work, but I think the method is self-inhibiting, and I think the idea of vocal fragments being manipulated around and moved to form words is completely empirically inadequate and incoherent as theory goes.
People need to know how to use them. That's the thing.
Yeah.
They confuse their radio voices for communication.
Yeah, and I think that's where the clarity needs to be, because what you guys are talking about is distinctly different from what I think how most people are using these boxes, using radio sweeping, and I think that's where a lot of the clarity needs to be, because as we know, most of the people turn on their television and they're watching a certain ghost hunter on television. We won't name names, but they're watching a certain person on television and they're hearing radio voices and they automatically think it's paranormal, and all the credibility just flies out the window. But what you guys are doing is very unique and very different, and I love how you're talking about the notion of frequency, because I'm gonna pass a little bit of a story to you guys from my own experience. with some of this, which I think is kind of interesting. My past co-host Mike sent me for Christmas one year, as kind of a bit of a joke, one of the radio sweeping ghost boxes. And because we used to joke about them all the time on the show, and just how they're misused and whatever. And what was really interesting was that we, like myself and a small group here in Alberta, have been in touch for a while with a group of entities through a numerous means of communication. And we kind of turned the box on the one night. We were kind of having some fun with them and said, I don't know what you're going to do with this. Have at it. Just have at it. Have fun. And what was really, really interesting was that at the time we had a Ouija board out, and we began to get numbers from them. Like usually 3 numbers, sometimes 4 numbers. And what was very interesting was that when what we realized what the numbers were radio frequencies. And when we turned the radio to whatever frequency it was, half of the stations I didn't even know existed. They were so far down that spectrum on the radio. I was like, I didn't even know that you could go that far. So when the numbers were coming through originally, I'm just like, this isn't a radio, so I don't know what this is. But so we were getting these numbers. And interestingly enough, as soon as we would get to whatever white noise station that it was, because we hit the point where we were just hitting white noise, a song would begin to come through on that channel where there was no station. And the song was a direct message of you are loved, you are beloved, you are looked after, and every single song was representative. And as soon as the song was over, went back to white noise. And we would get another number. So we would go down to that station and we would get another number, and then something else would come through. It was fascinating, and I still have the playlist that we ended up getting.
Wow.
That is fascinating.
That's fantastic.
It was absolutely incredible. And so that's one of the reasons why I was really excited to have you guys on tonight, because I haven't gone as far as you guys have with the technological side, but I've had occurrences go on like that, where it's been undoubtedly something that has been sending communication. And sometimes the song would be in a direct response to the question. And again, there's no radio station on that channel. Song would come through, would disappear after it was done. So it was really, really, really cool. So
that is.
Yeah, it was very, very interesting. So with what you guys are doing, how do you implement something like this in, whether you're in an investigation, or you're like in my situation where you kind of are a little more familiar with who you're talking to? How do you implement that in your work and what you're doing?
The funny thing is, I was mentored into direct radio voice directly through Dr. Annabella Cardoso, who is the only surviving of the original EVP and ITC pioneers in Europe. She's the only one left. I still, to this day, she texted me a couple of days ago. She's a sweetheart of a person. So that was how I got into it. It was also funny you mentioned the video feedback loop and the Schreiber method from Klaus Schreiber. I don't see a lot of that happening in the States. It's starting, I think, now to happen a little bit. And said Ghost Hunter from TV that you were alluding to before, they just started doing it on the one show. They just started doing that. And we were messing around with that a few years back. Because I think everybody settled into complacency on the Ghost Box in the States, and that was kind of how they rolled with it. What was important to us was that there were criticism lodged against ITC, and we thought we need to either directly address them or come to terms with that there may be certain loopholes that are going to be difficult to close. And the 2 main ones were radio bleed-through, radio voices coming through. So we eliminated the radio and the radio reception, which now vets that if we get anything vocal, it shouldn't be there.
Right.
The only other thing we got was from somewhat of a snooty audio engineer. And by the way, we had our system vetted and looked at by a gentleman named Rick Allen out of Arizona, who met us out in Pennsylvania. He is a top audio guru in Hollywood, sound effects and everything. And he sat down and looked through the entire system for possible false positive triggers, things that could be
And
creating
before that, it was
sounds.
Joshua Sean who looked
Right.
at
And then
it.
Joshua Sean, another
Yeah.
ITC guy who's
Yeah.
brilliant,
But yeah.
also had gone through it. So the only other thing that this one guy said was because that they're warbles and artifacts of sound, that they're not words. So I think at the level that we hear these things with the frequency, not in frequency meaning how often it happens, it's hard to lean on that kind of an explanation. But I said, well, let's look at that. And the idea is that white noise is random, and we can always discern patterns in randomness, right? So I went, well, that's fair. Let's look at it. So the first thing I looked at was that if we're discerning patterns in randomness, that's not a statement of debunkery. That's an appeal to our intellect. Because
Absolutely.
that's how we communicate, right? When we hear sounds, allophones, phonemes, contextually, syntactically, then that's how we have language. We don't ever hear the cat go meow, 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 and think, oh, he wants to go in the car and buy treats, right? So that's not a debunking statement.
Right. It supports it.
Right. And then the only other thing is that white noise is random. Well, white noise is not fundamentally random.
Yeah.
Right? There are things, we use the word random, and I think it gets used a lot in science too. When we cannot calculate or compute something at the moment, we say it's random. So it's an empty drawer, right? There's charged ion particles. There could be electromagnetic fields, deterministic speech, which is what we think is coming through. So it's not fundamentally random. What it is computationally irreducible. At the moment, it's not feasible or possible to make the calculations behind everything in the white noise, but on a fundamental level, no. So we felt like we did as much as we could to vet the authenticity of the voices. And how we implement it is that when we go to investigations or when we do public events, even when we do paracons now, we try to get a room instead of a table, and we'll run it every hour on the hour. The irony is, and she pointed this out because she catches all the profound things, Marcello Bacci was most famous with direct radio voice for doing sittings in Grosseto, Italy, where he had grieving parents for the most part come, right? And then he would give these people these moments of closure, these profound, meaningful connections. That's what happens to us now. When we take it out of the house and do public events, especially at Paracons. Last year in the one in New Jersey, we had 3 people with tissues and tears from hearing things come through that was meaningful to them.
We let them ask the questions. I mean, in the beginning we ask, right? But we always encourage them to ask the questions, because when they ask the questions, it's more likely they'll get a response, and it's more meaningful to them.
Yeah.
I
And
think it
they know
also
what
eliminates
they
fraud as well. Like, if
Right.
anybody's coming in skeptical and they're like, yeah, you've set this up prior. Well, if you're
Right.
the one that's bringing the question to the table, it's a little tougher.
So a lot of the times
Yeah.
we just let them ask the questions. Sometimes they get shy and they'll ask us, usually me, to ask the question. But for the most part, I always encourage them, because for me, I believe it's better that they ask the questions.
Yeah.
It's more likely they'll get a response.
And she is by trade a licensed New York State court reporter. So, and she's not in the courtroom anymore. So what is your slogan now?
What I do for the living, I do for the dead.
Love
She
it.
listens to voice recordings.
Yeah.
So when we do these events, a lot of times she'll hear the words clearly, even if it resonates lower, and then she'll say it. So why is that important? Because a lot of times, I think another thing that we do in the paranormal field a lot of times we give a very general, broad stroke to words like information. There's more than one type of information. You have at least symbolic and semantic information. So, like if I give a thumbs up to her across the street, if somebody's never seen that gesture before, they get nothing from it. If somebody knows the gesture means something good happens, they still don't have any semantic value. They don't know why I'm doing it. She knows that she just got good news and I'm doing this, and so that then there's semantic value. So she hears at the Jersey Paracon last year, this lady lost her son at the age of 15, 31 years prior. And she's sitting with us and she hears his name, Willie. She hears that he's a drummer, a lot of stuff that was very relevant to her that we didn't know.
Mention
So
about the medium.
Right. She had mediums tell her for years that because of the age he died and how long ago, she would never hear from him. Now, that is completely arbitrary. I don't know how anybody could say that's possible or impossible.
No, to me, that's ridiculous. Yeah.
What nailed this thing down was I see this look on her face and she's not saying something because she doesn't like to be the attention person, right? So she's just sitting there. I'm looking at her, I go, what did you hear? She goes, well, what did you hear? And she goes, I heard a voice clearly say, mention cookies. So now the lady starts crying even more, but like happy tears. And then she told us and she sent me the nicest email
That
ever,
is
like
so
you're etched in
sweet.
my heart. She told us that she had been diagnosed diabetic 11 months or so beforehand, and she hadn't had anything like that. The morning of the expo, she baked 2 trays of sugar-free cookies, and she had a bag of them in a Ziploc in her purse at that moment, which is zero chance that we could have known that. So that for her cinched it, but because of the bionic ear heard it,
Right,
we,
because
we
it
had a
has
moment.
semantic value, right?
Yeah.
Because for her it
Right.
meant that what that medium told her is caca.
Yeah.
And that, you know, that he knows he's around. He's around with everything else, right? He's part of everything now. And he's always around.
Absolutely. And you
So,
know what's so important I think about that story is like a couple of things, but is that time is a human construct. And
Oh yeah.
so to turn around and say, "Oh, it's been too long." Well, there is no too long. You know, everything's happening in the
Yeah.
now. There is no too
mm-hmm.
long.
I love that.
It's a very human construct. And you know, and I mean, I've had messages from people that died 100 years ago. Like, you know, it's just that's crazy.
And
Yeah.
who brought that information back? Did she go over there and say, "Okay, how long does it take?"
Right?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And then came like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's no.
I'm glad you brought.
People just pull
I'm,
facts out of their ear, you know? That's just what they do. It's
yeah.
just they make it up
A
and
lo-
then it's got to be real.
I'm
Right.
glad you brought that up too, because it reminds about 2 things. One, I totally agree, and we don't run into this enough with people. Again, this is why you were somebody I've admired for a long
Well,
time.
thank you.
Time is the appearance of cognitive proximity. It's a filing system for us to separate between moments or things. And when people talk about ITC stuff, this is something I wanted to mention before. They will say, "Well, what's the ghost frequency?" Or we need to figure out the ghost frequency. So they'll say that at the same time. They'll also say that time and space is not anything that is adhered to in any linear fashion in the spirit realm, quote unquote. So what is frequency? Frequency denotes oscillations per second. It's a unit of measure. If they don't have the scale by which to make the match on the unit of measure, then how are you going to have a ghost frequency? What we can do is we can work on frequencies, and I think this is what happened with your Ouija board thing. If I'm wrong, correct me. But when you were given numbers, it was given to you as something to receive. It wasn't a
Absolutely.
source signal.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's the delineation we don't make. One of the things that when we lecture and speak now that we do a lot, besides talking about analytic idealism as a metaphysics and a philosophy, is we talk about a lot of what are called I call them para-axioms, but they're the axioms in the paranormal. There's a lot of things that have been passed down like holiday traditions, like Thanksgiving has a turkey, that are accepted as self-evident, that are empirically ungrounded. They're internally inconsistent. They have no explanatory power, and nobody questions it. They're like, "Oh yeah, that's
Well,
just how it is."
and
I'm like,
then when you
no.
do question it, once
Yeah,
they
yeah,
run out of things, once they run out of ideas to say, then they'll just say, "Well, they just know how to do it."
yeah.
They always
Right.
Ghosts just know how to do it. Is
no.
an answer you will get.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
just
They
know.
start appealing to the court of physics, and then somewhere on that path, when they realize they've run into a snag, then they'll diverge into mysticism or anything else that allows them to introduce either the God gaps or the hidden variables that are unknowable, just so they can flesh out the theory and have add theoretical entities that are completely illusory to us, but they'll add them in because they have to hold the narrative.
See, the
I
thing
don't think
is,
that's good for the field.
right, the thing is that people want to debate these things, but they have to figure out what their philosophy is first. And they can't, if you're going to debate it, you can't grab from this philosophy and this
Yeah.
philosophy. You got to have a strong foundation and then you debate, right? So that's the problem. And then everything they're grabbing from doesn't make sense because it's all over the place.
Yeah,
So,
that's a big thing that we've been working on. Is I've been reading the works and studying the works of Dr. Bernardo Castro for the last few years. I got her into it. I've never seen her more jazzed about learning until I introduced her to Bernardo. There's now an ambassadorship program where a bunch of us meet every week, so I get to talk to him every week now. So I'm not just saying I'm studying under him by reading his books.
Right?
I actually get to talk to him. Um, and what's interesting is that, and like him, when we talk to the paranormal field, we're not claiming to have figured it out. We don't claim to have the answers. But the one thing I found to be important was we get hit with that whole, you don't think that's real, you don't think ghosts are real, you don't think this is real. But how many people take the extra step to go back and go, well, what do I think reality is? Because that's the standard by which this question would be answered, and they don't. And I think that's why a lot of times they invoke science when we come up with theories in the paranormal, and then we violate science at the same time because we don't have any kind of metaphysical clarity. So there are people who will leapfrog between metaphysics to be able to answer stuff, right? First of all, metaphysics does not mean spiritual woo stuff. I think that's a big accepted thing in the paranormal. It literally means that which stands behind the physics.
Yeah,
Right?
well,
Science will tell us what nature and reality doesn't tell us what nature and reality is. That's a metaphysical or philosophical argument to try to pin it down, not to know it, but to try to pin it down. So I think when they don't have a metaphysical platform, they will jump all over, they'll invoke science and then violate at the same time. And most of us were inculcated into physicalism, or what was known as materialism, because that's what we grew up with. And that's the reigning worldview since pre-Enlightenment times. But materialism is internally contradictory, and the reason is, in a nutshell, to kind of give like a brief, it defines matter in a way that makes it incommensurable with mind, and then it tries to explain mind in terms of matter.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not gonna it doesn't hold water anymore. I think, we're seeing materialism sort of fall down the ladder. And interestingly enough, I think it's being replaced by consciousness. I think the order in which we're perceiving reality is actually shifting, is switching in our understanding. That where materialism, I think, used to be on the top of that ladder, and now it's sort of sunk to the bottom, and now we've got consciousness that used to be at the bottom, and now it's becoming the I think the scientific standard as we move forward through things like quantum physics and things like what we're talking about here, where
panpsychism is the default go-to for former materialists.
Yes,
because it allows them to hold on to some of the narrative by saying that, okay, I don't have to deal with the hard problem of consciousness if I say that every atom of everything that exists is conscious, right? So then that's the way. Now you don't have to worry about the hard. For those who don't know, the hard problem of consciousness was put forth by a philosopher named David Chalmers, I think in 1994, and it basically says that there is no way to deduce, at least in principle, the qualities of experience from any material arrangements. Right, which is essentially what materialism does when it says that mind is created by the brain as an epiphenomenon.
Yeah, so for people that are listening, the basic idea is that of the hard problem is that it used to be thought of as that your brain is the thing that's generating consciousness. It's the thing that is the source of consciousness. It's why you're walking around in terms of our knowledge base and all of those things. And now the big question has become, is it something that's fundamental or emergent? And fundamental meaning, is this something that is actually coming from somewhere else, that our brain is acting like a transmitter and it's coming through rather than being emergent from the brain itself? So it's what's switching our thought process in regards to things like ITC, just to sort of pull us back to that subject, is that now when we begin to think, okay, if the consciousness is existing outside of the brain, if it's something else that our brain is translating, just like our eyes translate light or our tongue translates taste, and every other organ does the same thing, if that's the case, then things like video ITC, audio ITC, all of these things become a lot more tangible, I think, for people. When we start to realize it's not coming from necessarily the mind, it's coming from something else. So speaking of the mind, have you guys looked at the potential that some of what you're getting, like you were talking about the story about the cookies, could some of what is being recorded actually be some form of telepathy or something like that, where the person is imprinting on the tapes or in the recordings? Have you guys experimented with that, or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Look, we have. I know we both have something. If you want to go first, because there's a fundamental difference in how we view part of that as idealists. So I don't know if you want to.
Well, I wouldn't say that it's imprinting,
Right.
right? So, because what we do is real-time communication. That's first thing. I mean, we do record, and sometimes we'll have,
Right.
but I do think that it is telepathy. I honestly, and this is okay, and this is just my theory, but I do honestly, in my opinion, my theory, and I'm not saying that I'm correct. I believe everything that we see, everything around us, is some form of telepathy, is telepathic communication. So I do believe that we are picking up telepathy, consciousness. If it's the collective consciousness, yeah, and honestly, maybe sometimes we're picking up on ourselves, I believe. Maybe when someone is sleeping or something like that. Not that we're causing it. Not that we're causing it. That's something else. But I think it's a form of telepathy. Yes, we are. That's what I believe. Yes.
Yeah, so I agree with that. I think, well, so as for people who don't know, analytic idealism posits that reality is fundamentally mental. That consciousness is the ontological primitive. It is the one thing by which everything can be explained, but itself cannot be reduced to anything else. Um, so coming from that framework, and this is the importance of knowing one's metaphysical position, this is an example of where I've started seeing benefit from it. So do I think that the people in the room could have any causal influence on stuff that comes through or what happens? Yes, I
Yeah.
do.
I think
But
it
the
has to be a
second you,
factor at some point.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely. The
Yes.
second you infer that something was imprinted or something was put onto a device through mentation in a telepathic way, you're invoking physicalism as the metaphysics, which says that it's not plausible or possible and doesn't allow a space for it, right? So the idealist would say that reality is fundamentally mental. It's thought, right? It's mental processes, not mine or yours, but the same way mine would be objective to you because they're outside of your own mentation, individuated, so would the mental processes of reality. So the idealist would say that there is no recorder. There, right? The recorder, and we know this from quantum field theory and quantum physics, that physicality is the result of measurement, right? Physicality does not exist prior to measurement.
Sure.
So if
Yeah, yeah.
physical things are a result of measurement, then there is no recorder. It is the image or representation of what's out there, and we believe there's a world out there, but it's not something in and of itself outside of consciousness. As soon as you have consciousness as a dichotomy with mind and matter being both exclusively but jointly able to explain all of the totality of reality, right? When you have that dichotomy, you need to look at it closer, I think, because what you find is that in order to have matter per what we now know through observation or measurement, you have to perceive before you can measure. And what do you need to have before you can perceive? Consciousness. So consciousness would have primacy. So to have a true dichotomy, the ideas have to exist at the same level of abstraction, which in that instance they don't, because consciousness is a prerequisite for even being able to measure, which is then what gives you the physicality, right? So matter, and they know that too, particles are not little marbles that exist in and of themselves. These are the
Exciting.
results of measurement, right? And they are expectations of the field, and the fields are obviously just models for science to try to explain things. So
But
I do think that when somebody's in the room, I don't think that they're telepathically communicating a message from themselves to a recorder or through a speaker. Because when you start saying that there's a speaker with a frequency capability of receiving somebody's thought, you open up a whole other can of worms to not only the same reason why we can't just turn on any device and come on 95.5 FM and interrupt a radio station, right? There are certain, from a physical perspective, constraints to that. But then what's the control for? Like, wouldn't that happen all the time haphazardly? You'd be driving to work, listening to your favorite song, you're thinking about, oh, I hate my boss, and then that comes out of the radio. Are there instances of that
well,
happening?
Well, yeah,
well, and
I think there's like, I think the reason why I asked that question is because I've had this conversation prior with Lloyd Auerbach as well, and we were talking about photography, like anomalous photography at the time. And the one thing that I found really interesting, which may tie into this, it might not, is that there's no, as we know, there of course there's no litmus test for a ghost photo or anything like that. Nobody knows how this stuff is created. We have no idea. But the one thing that always struck me as very, very interesting is that the people always think, well, if I have this like specialized camera, then the camera is going to see something that's, outside of my ability and frequency to see. And that was the one thing that Lloyd and I, we had discussed, was the fact that, well, that's really not true. And the reason behind that is the fact that if you've got a photo and if you did not see whatever it was snapped in the photo, then it's not, the camera cannot see outside our line of vision. If we're not perceiving it, that's it. Or if we are perceiving it, then that's what we're perceiving. That's ultimately what's there. And what's interesting is that with a photo like that, it means that these pictures, whatever it is, whether we're talking about like video ITC or we're talking about just a DSLR camera, whatever it is, that image is being gifted to us on some level. And because if we're not seeing it, then the camera can't see it either. So something is being offered. And so I'll take that point and just elaborate on that a little bit with some interesting research by a fellow who I know I've brought up a million times on the show. So I'm sorry, audience, I'm just going to repeat this very quickly. A very interesting neuroscientist by the name of Dr. Morris Friedman. And he's he's Canadian. And he was doing really interesting research on people who had brain injury and Alzheimer's and things like that. And what was really fascinating, just to sort of make this as concise as possible, is that what he discovered was that some of these, not all, but some of these people had and reported being able to do things like communicate with loved ones, receive messages similar to, audio, stuff like that. But they're able to do this. And they're reporting these high levels of being able to interact with whatever consciousness this is. And what his theory was the fact that it's because whatever filters in the brain are being either damaged or whatever's going on with, whether it be Alzheimer's or, somebody fell and had a head injury or got in a car accident or whatever, is that this communication stops being inhibited by these filters that are now busted.
Well,
but anyway, so my point being with this whole thing is that I see a lot of similarities with like what you guys are saying, and some of what's going on with this is that there's some sort of level of consciousness that we're like obviously maybe not able to receive right away because we're in this realm of walking around and we have to be able to perceive a reality that we can understand. Because if we don't and we're perceiving everything, then we've got a problem. I don't think we would be able to function. We wouldn't. And
because the communication that we're receiving with the equipment that we have, as when someone says that maybe perhaps we're causing it, it's because we're part of the equation. The communication doesn't happen to us or by us. It happens through us.
Yeah, I love that.
So when someone has an injury or a disease that then makes them more porous to be able to receive that information through them, that's what happens.
Yeah, and
that's what we believe.
No,
right?
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
To elaborate on that, because when she used the word porous, so under analytic idealism, universal phenomenal consciousness is the ontological primitive. It is the fundamental basis for reality, and then we are all individuated fractal parts of it, right? So it's skeptically parsimonious. It'll explain. You can explain everything from there with fewer theoretical steps. What the gentleman's work was referring to in some of those situations, as an idealist, totally agree. But for us, it's because we have, through our sensory input, limited, and we know this because we know we don't have access to infrasound, or we don't have access to infrared or UV, right? So we have, through our sensory input, what is salient for us to survive, right? For us to not walk outside and go under a truck. So there are things we can extrapolate just from infrasound and infrared. There are things we can extrapolate from that are outside of what are salient for us to know.
Absolutely.
We can't know reality in its totality. It would be overwhelming. We don't know of any upper bounds to any structural integrity to the universe or the cosmos, but our cellular structure and integrity does have an upper bounds. And if we took the reality in as a mirror, we would turn into entropic soup. Through entropy, we would just melt. It would be overwhelming. So there's a gentleman named Donald Hoffman who uses an example of like a computer interface, right, where you look at a desktop and you have an icon. You double click it, it opens up a folder, you double click another icon, and then a video plays and all the stuff that comes with it. You don't experience every wire, every circuit, every codec, every transistor that's part of the process, every resistor, capacitor. You just have the experience. So we get the salient points that we need, right? So we have a dissociative boundary as individuated states, and the model that Dr. Kastrup uses for what's called the decomposition problem. If there's one mind that comprises reality in its totality, then how do you explain us?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's the decomposition problem. And the explanation that he gives for it is that if there's something in nature that shows us an example, we can extrapolate from that perhaps on a larger scale. Now, not to anthropomorphize it. It's not for us where we look at this as a pathology. It's not on that scale, but it does show us an instance with nature is doing something where one mind fragments into individual centers of identity.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So in that instance, we have this dissociative boundary which separates us. And the appearance of the dissociative boundary and the appearance of our brain is what our inner phenomenal consciousness looks like across a dissociative boundary to somebody else. So there is something called, I think it's called a sudden savant syndrome, I think, if I got the name right, where sometimes people will have an injury, a brain injury or something, and then they will have all of a sudden this incredible genius ability to do math faster than a computer or to compose music. Spontaneous savant syndrome. So that's one aspect of what he's saying. So what we think happens is, and this speaks to the brain not being causal with causing consciousness, because if it's causality from brain activity, then every time you had a more vivid, heightened experience, you would have to have excitations in the brain that matched it every time, one to one, because it's causal.
Right.
But we know from meditation, the choking game kids would play, psychedelic use, that there is a complete reduction in brain activity, almost to the point of death in some psychedelic cases, where you have vivid experience, realer than real, and a complete reduction in brain activity, which means it's not causal. So again, what you quoted with his work, I totally agree. The only reason we look at a difference is for us, because of the physical, is what the appearance or the representation of our consciousness looks like saying the brain. We don't look at it as a filter, because everything is within consciousness. So if everything is within consciousness, at least for us, right? The brain as a filter for consciousness and being within consciousness would be like having a coffee filter made out of coffee.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, like that you're bringing up sort of the idea of like near-death experience and people like that. We had Dr. Eben Alexander on the show multiple times. He's a amazing man. And for audience, if you missed his episodes, please go back and check them out. He's absolutely phenomenal. He had a case of very rare meningitis that put him into a coma, and his brain was basically off. I mean, you're talking about reduced brain function. His brain wasn't working at all. And he had this, exactly what you're talking about. He had this incredible experience, and that went on, and he saw his a sister who had passed away, who he had never met, didn't find that out as to who she was until he woke up later, and discovered a photo of her and was like, "Who the heck is this? I've seen her before." They're like, "Oh, it's, she passed away before you ever met her." So there was all of these amazing things. His book was called Proof of Heaven, you guys. So if you guys want to go out and take a read of that, everybody listening, it's phenomenal. But it speaks to what you're saying in terms of how we're beginning to learn and understand that this consciousness is something that is permeating everything. And I mean, I've gotten through communications that I've done over the years. I've gotten different languages. At one point, we got an African language coming through that was from this tiny little town in Africa. There was one of the entities that we had conversed with regularly. We asked him where he was from, and he said Mother Mola, and we were like, "What the heck is? We don't know what that is." So we Google it, and it turns out it's this remote little town or piece of Africa, Central Africa, called Mola. And of course, Mother Africa. So it was Mother Mola. It was just the coolest thing. But so we were getting things in other languages, and then we would have to use Google Translate just to figure out exactly what was being said. It was really, really, really interesting. And, so you know that there's more. Like there has to be. Yeah. There has to be more. But so for people who are listening that maybe are doing the basics of things like video ITC and EVP and things like that, what would you recommend as best layman's terms as you can, because I know we're talking like super technical in this episode, but in the best layman terms that you can for people listening, what can they do to get maybe not to the level that you're doing it, but to up the experience so that they're having better communication with whatever's out there, whatever they believe is out there?
Well, I mean, I don't know. The one thing that came to mind to me is that the gentleman who introduced us to the software, named Keith Clark from Paranormal, VARA, Paranormal.com. If you look him up, he started for a very reasonable price, helping people get set up, running the whole virtual studio and live filtration, similar to what we do. It won't sound like ours out of the gate because I put 3 years or so
Right.
of tinkering with it and trying to make stuff happen. But to get the ground floor of doing something that's just white noise, even if you start with the radio on a vacant channel, to get beyond what just the ghost box can do, I think the ghost boxes work. Again, there's a lot of really talented builders out there making them. This for us was a chance to bring back direct radio voice and then to try to do something to not just replicate what Bocce did, but maybe advance it. So that's why we're working under the constraints that we do now with having no radio and that stuff. So I would say that would be a good thing. You can get a white noise generator, not necessarily a sleep machine, though those can work, but an analog white noise generator, and then you reach out to Keith, I guess. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I would say that if you're a new investigator, you should probably build a connection first. Start with your recorders and you build the connection first, because
Good advice.
what we do is I would suggest a more experienced investigator or communicator do it, because it really isn't easy. It looks easy, but it really isn't. It takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of time and dedication, and that people can do it. Obviously, I'm not saying that, but we did build a connection beforehand. And I think in order for this to work for anyone in any equipment that you do, you have to build that connection first. So that would be my advice.
I'll second that, because that's been the main thing for myself as well, is they consciousness, these entities, whoever you happen to be talking to, they will absolutely work with you to figure it out. I think that's the one thing that people really need to get. They
And one thing
want
that
to talk.
I wanted to just touch upon, because every time you say, I just wanted to touch upon, because you said something, and I don't about like consciousness replacing physics, which I think because people
Replacing
people,
materialism. Replacing
well,
materialism.
okay,
yeah.
okay, materialism, right? Because people think that we need physics, guys. It's not gonna disappear. We need it. It's not gonna be replaced. It's just that it doesn't come first.
Yeah,
Consciousness
exactly.
is the foundation.
It's in the continuum, and I think
Right.
And I think the one thing too, we've been bashing materialism a little bit, but we really can't bash materialism either, because without materialism, we wouldn't have the information that we have now. We've needed it. It's been a needed step in the cog of science to get us to where we are.
It's been what they call the convenient fiction
it's a
that
series
was
of convenient
useful
fictions, yeah.
that was useful to help us into what we are. Yeah,
Right.
but it's hit a wall, and now we got to figure it out.
Yeah, there has to be more, and
Right,
I think
and
that's all it is that it's expanding from where it was, because I really think it gets easy for us to hindsight 2020 and go, okay, yeah, these certain steps were wrong, but they're really not wrong. I mean, everything that we do,
Right.
like you were saying, Ron, at the beginning, which is it's standing on the shoulders of the people that came before us, and
Absolutely.
when that was their version of the world that they were examining and seeing, it's allowed us to realize that, wait a minute, there is more. Because without that step of materialism, we would not have had the contrast to say, well, wait a minute, then what about these 10 things?
Right.
Well,
Well, with the mistakes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Without the mistakes, you can't find your way, right? But I guess the problem is that we have human beings in these circles
Yeah.
that when they hit a wall, instead of saying, okay, let me take a step back, let me look over here,
Yeah.
they want to continue there, and that's where everything gets messy.
Yeah, and if I can, because I don't want to at this very moment make the mistake I think that we were referring to earlier. Um, Materialism, physicalism, panpsychism, solipsism, idealism. These are metaphysical positions. They're philosophical. Science, if done properly, and with people, of course, this is where unexamined biases and stuff come into play. Science is supposed to be metaphysically agnostic, metaphysically neutral. So, is it important to know the metaphysical position of somebody doing science? Yes, because if they have a metaphysical position that says that you're talking to spirits or whatever you do is irrational, then they will rule out and dismiss things out of hand that should be factored into or at least examined um, on some level for what it is, right? So it's important because it gets conflated a lot when people say materialistic science or materialistic. What they
Right.
mean is material realism. Science is not um, supposed to be metaphysically biased, and we're confusing the two. Science tells us what nature and reality does. It models and predicts behavior. It doesn't tell us what it is. And I think one of the problems in the paranormal field now is that in a quest for validity and credibility, we are trying to cram everything under the umbrella
Right.
of science.
They work side by side,
And
guys.
with that come unexamined assumptions. So for the age of toys and technology, is science a most productive path? Sure. But for an enlightened or an insightful life or existence, I would say no. And I think what people miss is that when we cram everything and make everything science, they lose what's important about it. Science gains its strength from its restrictions, from its constraints, from having things that it can't speak to, things it cannot reach. From those things come its strengths, because if you're operating or commercing outside of those things, you're not doing science. So those limitations exist for a reason. You can't cram everything under science. It dilutes it, and then it confuses things like metaphysical positions and ontology. A beingness is not something science can speak to. It can tell you what reality's doing. It doesn't tell you what it is.
Right. They just keep each other in check.
So
You know what I mean?
materialism existed only from pre-Enlightenment time because scientists like Giordano Bruno got burned at the stake. So they surrendered all the mystical, spiritual, meaningful stuff to the church, and then they stayed and they separated. They knew at the time it was wrong, but they did it because it was a means to not only survive from the church, but at some point they also tried to use it to supplant the church, who had a stranglehold on the population. So that's a big thing to not lose sight of.
Yeah.
That metaphysics is not the same thing as science.
So it's a really, it's good advice, and I think for everybody listening, hopefully it just puts you guys on a different path of thought, which is what I was hoping this episode would do, and I think it has. I think everybody's gonna walk away going, okay, I've got some things to sort out, which is amazing. You guys have been phenomenal. How can people get a hold of you? How can people see your work? And can they join in with obviously they can join in with you guys on the digital seance and all of these things. So come on, give me your pitch.
All right, I'm gonna let Ron do it, but because I think this is important. Guys, if you're interested in analytic idealism and want to know more, you should really check out Dr. Bernardo Kastrup. Check him out on YouTube. Look him up and just see what the man has to say. He makes a lot of sense.
And also more finite or more of a fine point on that. I mentioned it to you, Morgan, prior to today's show. I'm putting out a course soon, which is called Metaphysics and Paranormality. And what it does is it takes a lot of these metaphysical positions from an idealist perspective, and it shows how it allows for a space for these things to happen, that they don't get ruled out or dismissed out of hand. I don't specifically say it, but I know that, especially since I know you're very deep into parapsychology, I think psychology and parapsychology are more fundamentally helpful to the study of this phenomenon than physics itself is. I think that the physics is at the top of the chain as far as status and sciences to people, but I think that psychology and parapsychology are probably more vital to what it is we do from the sciences part of it.
At least in this phase of it,
Right.
where we are right now.
So the course I'll make available soon. I'll have a link to it on our website, which is Gonyac Paranormal, GONYAC, GonyacParanormal.com. And it's called Metaphysics and Paranormality. One quick aside I wanted to say because you had mentioned the man's name. So I don't know if Lloyd Auerbach, I think he knows who we are. I'm not sure, but he's, to me, I've never had a chance to talk to him. To me, he's an iconic and an incredible human being in the field. Back before I was even involved in this stuff, a very good friend of mine, I did stand up for a long time, so I'm also a satirist, which really helps catching hypocrisy a lot. And I worked with a gentleman named Peter Jordan. Peter Jordan was a parapsychologist, and he was very close. Him and Lloyd knew each other very well, so I've known who Lloyd is for a long time. So that was another reason why being here on your show with you, because I know the people that you interact with, and I think he's incredible. I wish Peter was still involved in the field. He unfortunately either stepped away from it. But when he did stand-up comedy, interestingly enough, the name he had a stage name because he kept his parapsychology and his paranormal stuff separate from the entertainment stuff. But the name he used in comedy was Peter Jung, Jung. So
Nice.
he was a Jungian
That's
who was
nice.
also an idealist.
I don't think you told me that.
Yep.
Oh wow.
He's a
That's
Jungian too.
fantastic. Yeah,
Right?
And
Lloyd
for
is
that-
wonderful. He is
Yep.
a co-host here just a couple of episodes ago. He'll be a returning co-host going forward.
Well,
He's
let him know
fantastic.
that we have a ton of respect for him, and one day I would love to sit down and be able to talk to him.
Some of these two chuckleheads said hi.
Yeah.
Well, I will do. Thank you guys so much for this. This has been absolutely amazing, and I can't wait to see where this goes next. So thank you guys again for doing this.
Thank you. We're
Thank you
very,
for having us.
very honored and appreciative that you had us.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso Virtual Coffee Machines. Ready to enjoy the bold flavors of barista-quality Nespresso iced coffee at home? Simply fill a glass with ice and press the brew button on your virtual pop machine to enjoy rich double espressos roasted to stand up even when chilled. Refreshingly bold iced coffee. Refreshingly easy to make at home. Visit Nespresso.com to shop now.
It's summer. Time to enjoy long days, lazy nights, and zero cooking. Because Uber Eats has deals all summer long. So, when hunger strikes, don't sweat it. Delicious deals are just a tap away on Uber Eats. Enjoy all your favorite food delivered straight to you. Get Burger King, Subway, Popeyes, and hundreds more local favorites and savor every last bite. Now that sounds like a good summer. Order now on Uber Eats. Terms apply. Product availability varies by region. See app for details.
Are you a forward thinker? Then you need an HR and finance platform that thinks like you do. Workday is the AI platform that helps propel your organization, your workforce, and your industry into the future. Workday, moving business forever forward.
Well, what a discussion that was. I hope you guys stayed with it long enough to get to this part of the show. I know it got super techie. A lot of big ideas presented today and some really, really interesting thoughts about how this stuff might work, might come together. I wanted to share my thoughts about this a little bit because I've actually delved into this level of communication pretty heavily, specifically over the last couple of months. And what's really interesting about this is that this type of technology actually didn't start recently. This actually started back in the 70s and 80s with a project called Spiricom. Now, the idea was, even back then, was wouldn't it be cool if you could just pick up the phone, essentially, or some sort of communication device, and speak to another realm, right? Sounds super impossible, but it's not been out of the realm of people's ideas, imaginations, and reality. Now, the Spiricom project is really fascinating, and there was a fellow who used to work for NASA that actually started to spearhead the Spiricom project and ended up putting together a device, and you guys can actually go look up these tapes and things like that on YouTube, He actually spearheaded a device called Spiricom with the help of an entity that called himself Dr. Mueller. And when they asked Dr. Mueller who he was actually an engineer in his lifetime. So it made sense that he was really interested in putting this all together. So by the time they were done, and there were multiple modes of the Spiricom project that they called Mark, was created. There was multiple versions of this great big system using multi-tone converters and white noise and pink noise and all these types of things. You can actually download the blueprints still. I'll include those in the show notes. And they had a one-to-one conversation going with this Dr. Mueller. And the recordings are really interesting. They've been very controversial over the years. A lot of people said they were faking them. But what's interesting is that nobody's really disproven it. And from what I've been able to research in terms of my own studies, I think there's great legitimacy to what was going on there. And these various experiments over the years, such as the Skoll experiment, things like that, have actually really reshaped how people are dealing and looking at this spirit communication. So I hope you guys take something interesting away from this. I definitely learned a ton. One of the things that I think needs to be remembered when we're talking about this type of thing is that even though everything is non-physical, as we've talked about so many times on this show, is that we are still dealing with matter. We're still dealing with physical apparatuses that have to be utilized in a specific way. And one of the examples, of course, that I gave during the interview was the fact that, these cameras, these audio recorders, they can only pick up on what's around us. And when a lot of these voices and a lot of these imprints, I guess is like the best way to put them, are left within the system, we have to be in the right receiving place to even pick them up, or we're not going to see it, right? Because everything around us is non-physical. We're a receiver, no matter what the system is. So I think when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, the big thing is, no matter what type of technology you're using, is be a good receiver, right? Go into these locations with high levels of joy, curiosity, happiness, a welcoming spirit, and, pun intended, but you're going to have some semblance of results because these entities so want to communicate. And this is something that's supposed to be really positive. So I'm really interested to hear if you guys have come up with anything interesting. You can head over to Supernatural Circumstances after the show on Facebook, on the group, and share some of your stories or experiences. It would be really cool. And I'm looking forward to hearing them. So I hope you guys had a really interesting experience with this conversation. Tons to think about. Thank you for joining us on this eerie expedition, my dear listeners. And remember, there is no line between the natural and the supernatural. All is consciousness. Until next time, stay curious, friends. Supernatural Circumstances is a co-production of Entity Seeker, Paranormal Research and Teachings, and the 20th Plane. This podcast is a part of the Curious Cast podcast network. You can find out more about me, Morgan Knudsen, and book me for live appearances at entityseeker.ca. You can also email the show at supernaturalcircumstances.com.
Canada is best known for politeness, maple syrup, and hockey, but beneath the surface lies something far darker. I'm Mike Brown, and along with my co-host Matthew Stockton, we uncover the sinister side of Canada on the award-winning true crime podcast, Dark Poutine. Each Monday, we dive into chilling criminal cases, eerie historical events, strange disappearances, and spine-tingling tales of the paranormal, all with a uniquely Canadian twist. With over 300 episodes to binge for free, our stories reach far beyond Canada's borders, drawing in curious minds from around the world. If you're drawn to the dark, the mysterious, and the downright weird, it's time to join us. To explore the shadowy side of the True North, search for Dark Poutine, that's Poutine, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you're listening right now.